Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on this edition of the Data Doctor. Today, we're going to look at one of the least understood and the most confusing features inside Tableau, and that's the use of context filters. And we're going to take a look at how you create them, what they're used for, and what they actually do to your calculations. Now, we can't talk about context filters without understanding a bit about the order of operations. And this is the model that I use. I know other people use a different model for the order of operation. I like looking at the 10 steps. And context filters are the third step, and we're going to concentrate today on steps 3, 4, and 5, although we're going to look at the other steps also. Well, what exactly does the order of operations do? Every time you create a new worksheet, you go through the order of operations. And what's happening on the worksheet is you're creating a data table that sits under each individual worksheet. And you can kind of think of it like an Excel spreadsheet. And it's a subset of your total data. You know, you loaded data in, whether it came in from a flat file or whether it came from a database. And as you put dimensions on the rows and columns, it's kind of like putting headers on your Excel spreadsheet. As you put those dimensions on the rows and columns and you filter, you're creating a structure for a data table for that specific worksheet. Once that data table is created, the structure is created, then you just load it full of values and you do some math and decide what that worksheet's going to look like, what the presentation is going to look like. I like to think of the order of operations in 3 steps. The first group is steps 1 and 2, and they are extract filters and data source filters, and they operate at the workbook level. They filter data out before it ever gets in your workbook, and they make your workbook perform better. It's performance enhancement. Now, the next 3 steps where we're going to focus today, create that data table, and that's using context filters, followed by the creation of sets, fixed LOD, and top N, and then dimension filters. At that point, the data table structure is complete. And all we do after that is we load data into it. You either blended data or using calculations or bringing measures to the canvas itself. We do some math, maybe do a little more filtering on the measures, and decide what the business is going to look like. Well, let's focus on those 3 steps, steps 3, 4, and 5. And the order here is very important, and this is where people get most confused. Context filters are applied in step 3, and they're applied before sets, fixed LODs, and top N are calculated. So if you apply a filter in context, that data is filtered out before you calculate your fixed LODs, sets, and top N. Dimension filters are applied after the fixed LODs and sets and top N are determined. Let's see how that works. We're going to use this very simple data set. And if you've seen some of my other presentations on the order of operation, you've seen this data set before. And I would suggest to you, whenever you're learning something new, make a very simple data set, something you can look at and you can say, oh yeah, that did what I expected, or something's not quite the way I thought it was going to work. So this data set just has fruits and vegetables. We've got different types of produce under fruits and vegetables, and we're just taking price times quantity equals the total cost. And with that, I've got an LOD that we're calculating here, and it's a very simple LOD. I'm going to open it up here. And all this LOD does, it looks at the type level, either fruits or vegetables, and it sums the total cost. So as you can see here, here's the total cost. Here's the sum of total cost for fruit, and the LOD is returning $5.75 and $2.63. So it's doing what we wanted it to do. Now we're going to filter on produce name. I've added it to the filter shelf, and I want to show you what's going to happen when we put produce name in context and out of context. And very often we get a question. It says, how do I write a calculation that ignores the filter? Well, Tableau never ignores filters. What you do as a designer is you decide when you want that filter applied. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to filter out banana. Okay, the produce name right now is not in context. This is a dimension filter. And we know here, dimension filters are applied after the LOD is calculated. So when we filter out banana, the LOD remains the same. It's $5.75. We filtered out bananas. They're no longer in the table, but we filtered out the bananas after the LOD was calculated. Now, we're going to put the produce name in context. And to do that, all we have to do is open up the pill. I just right-clicked on, I just left-clicked on the pill, add to context, and two things are going to happen. First, you're going to see that produce name is now moved to the top of the filter frame, telling you that it's going to be applied before any other filters are applied, and it's turned gray. There's a visual recognition that, oh, gray filters are in context, blue filters or green filters are not in context. Now when I filter out banana, the filter is going to be applied before the LOD is calculated, and now our LOD returns $3.75. So the formula, the LOD, is not ignoring, if you will, the filter. You as a designer are deciding, are you going to apply that filter before the LOD is calculated or after? Now let's see what happens when we look at a set. And the set I've created here also uses top end. So we're going to look at both of these at once. And here's our set. And the set is just very simply determined by taking the top three based on the total cost column. So the top three items here are going to be apples, bananas, and green beans. And you can see I've just placed our set on columns, and you can see what's in the set and what's out of the set. Well, to show you the effect of the LOD, I'm just going to hide the outset. So we're just looking at the in. It makes it a little easier to see. And we're going to do the same thing here. We've got produce name is now in context, so it's going to be applied before the set is determined and before the top end are determined. And I'm going to filter out bananas. And when I filter out bananas, the in is now apples, green beans, and spinach. Okay, the filter was applied before the top three were calculated. And if we just look on the out, we can see that there's no bananas. They're gone. They've been filtered out of the data table. And that filtering applied before the LOD was calculated, or before the top end was calculated. Now let's see what happens when I remove produce name from context. It's turned into a blue filter, a blue pill, if you will. It's going to be a dimension filter that's applied after the top three are determined. And now I'm going to take out bananas, and there's only two values. And we'll get questions quite often. They said, well, look, I wanted the top three, and I went through and I applied a filter, and I'm only seeing two values. What went wrong? Well, nothing went wrong. You just determined the top three, and then you filtered out one of those three, in this case, bananas, after the top three were calculated. And if we go and we just look at the out, which is not in the set, it's out of the top three, there's a total of four values. Grapes and spinach are in the out group. They're not in the top three, and apples and green beans are. So I hope you understand a little bit about what the context filter does in relationships to fixed LODs, top end, and sets. It's really nothing more than you making a decision on when you want to apply that filter. Now, during the discussion here, we've been talking a lot about the data table that underlies the specific worksheet. And we talked a lot about applying dimension filters. Now, to look at this example, what I've got here is the Superstore data set. That's the same sample data set that's shipped with every copy of Tableau. Mine happens to be the US version. Yours might be a little different depending upon the part of the world that you're in, because there are different sample data sets in different parts of the world. And to create this example, all I've done is I put year on columns, and then I've got product category and subcategory on rows. And we haven't applied any filters. I can apply filters later, but we haven't applied any filters at this point. So we're looking at the full data set. Now, you may not be aware of this, but if you want to see the data itself, I can come over here to this icon that says View Data, and I'm going to click on that. And when I use this icon, I'm looking at the full data set. It's what's loaded into Tableau, okay? And the Superstore data set has 10,000 records in it. And these are all the records that are loaded into the workbook that I have here today. I can also come up here to Analysis, and I can open this tab, and I can look at View Data here. And this data set, or this view, is the data in the data table on this particular worksheet. So right now I'm looking at the summary level. It says there's 68 rows. And you say, well, Jim, that's not 68 rows of data. There's far fewer than that. But if we make that data table look like what a narrow, tall data table, the type of data that Tableau likes to look at, there's 68 rows of data. And if I take a look at the full data set, the data that's underlying the summary there, it's 10,000 rows. It's all the data. So now I can come back and we've all done this. I can come and filter out office supplies and the view changed. Okay, I'm no longer looking at the same view. If I come over and look at the total data set, I still have 10,000 rows of data in the workbook. But if I look at the data sheet, the data table that underlies this particular worksheet, I no longer have the same number of rows. I've got 32. We had 68. There's 32 rows in the summary, and the full data table is now 4,000 rows of data. The other 6,000 rows are not in this data sheet, and they can no longer be used in any analysis on this data sheet. Now, we get a lot of questions, and I'm just going to add sales here, and you've probably done this yourself. You say, I want to know what the percent difference is, and I'm going to put sales back in. So we can see the sales by year by subcategory, and we can also see the difference, the percent difference. And we'll have users come in and they'll say, hey, look, my user wants to filter to the last year, to 2020 in this example. And when I do that, I can no longer see the percent difference. What happened? What did I do wrong? And I usually write a reply that says, look, you can't filter out data and then use it in the data, use it in your calculation. But I want to take you a little deeper in here so you can actually see what's happened when when we apply this filter. We're going to go back up to analysis here, and we're going to open up the view. And this is the summary table now. We've seen a couple examples of this. This is the summary table, and you can see the measures. We got sales in here, and we've also got the percent difference. And you can see for the year 2020, we've got values. And in the summary table, for the percent difference, we've got nulls. That's a placeholder that represents this cell, and it's got no values in it at all. And if we look at the full data set, we now only have 1,300 rows. We filtered out 2017, 18, and 19, and the only data we have in the data set is data for 2020. Okay. So what did we learn about context filters, and what did we learn about dimension filters? Well, the combination of context filters and dimension filters are shaping the data table. You're creating a structure for a data table. The only values that are available for analysis on that worksheet are values that are in that data table. Applying a context filter determines when that filter is applied in relation to fixed LODs, sets, and top end. And that's all that's happening there. It's no more difficult than that. Now, I've had a few users say, hey, wait a minute, there's another type of LOD. There's include and exclude. And how does use of the context filter affect the include and exclude statement? Well, I want to go back to our order of operations here and just take a look. Context filters are applied in step 3. Fixed LOD are applied in step 4. Dimension filters in step 5, but include and exclude are not determined until step 7, after both the context filters and the dimension filters have been applied. Well, what that means is that they are unaffected. The include and exclude statement are unaffected by the use of a context filter. And I've got an example here. We've got two statements. One is this is the include statement. This says include segment, sum of sales. And we've got that same statement as a fixed calculation, fixed sum of sales. So I've got region in as a filter. And right now I've only got three regions in here, east, south, and west. And the region filter is a dimension filter, so it's being applied after the LOD is calculated. Okay. So the LOD, and this is the total, this is $2.3 million of sales, this is the total data. And it's the same whether I filter out the central region or I don't filter out the central region, because as far as the LOD is concerned, the region is being filtered out after the LOD is calculated. Okay. Now let's put the region in context. And when I put the region in context, now the filter is being applied on the fixed value before the LOD is calculated. So the fixed value will change when I change the filter. But notice that the include statement also changes. And if the region is not in context, the include value also changes, because the include statement is determined in step 7, well after both the context filters are applied and the dimension filters are applied. Now I've got one more example that I want to share with you this morning, because this comes up once in a while where someone will ask and they say, well, what I'd really like to do is I'd like to calculate my percent of total, or I'd like to make a calculation that uses a dimension in the context filter, and at the same time, I've got another calculation that I don't want to apply the context filter. And they're saying, well, wait, I want to take the same dimension and I want it to be in the context filter and out of the context filter at the same time. And the short answer is you can't do that. It's either the dimension is either in context or it's not in context. But what you can do is you can have two separate calculations, and I'm going to show those to you here. One that's affected by the context filter and one that is not. I've got this LOD, and this is just fixed sum of sales. This is what are the total sales. And I've got an exclude statement. It says exclude the category and the subcategory. I've got category and subcategory in the view. Don't use them and determine the sum of sales. Now, this exclude statement is calculated in step 7 of the order operation. The fixed LOD is calculated in step 4, so it's affected by the use of a context filter. And I've got category now as a dimension filter. And you can see, as far as fixed is concerned, it's at $3 million, or $2.3 million. It is unaffected by the filter on category. And I can come back and I can put office supplies back in, or I can take them out, and that value is unaffected. Where the exclude LOD is affected by the filter that we apply on category. Okay. I've also come back and I've determined the percent of sales based on the exclude sale. This is just the sum of sales divided by the exclude LOD. And I've done the same thing. Whoops. I've done the same thing on the fixed calculation. And this is the percent of sales on based on the fixed calculation. And you can see those values here. So this is 32 and 36% of the total based on fixed, and it's 47% or 53% based on exclude. So these will total 100, and these are the value compared to the total sales. And these are the value of this as a percentage of the sales that are in the view, if you will. And if we just real quick, I'm just going to show you that these numbers over here are not going to change based on whether this is in context or not. These will change if they're based on context. We do not want category in context. So what you're able to do now, and we can look at it in bar chart, and it's a little easier to see. This calculation, the blue lines, are based on the percent using the total data set, or the $2.2 million, where the orange bars are only the percentage based on the filtered value. So we're able to take a look at the category both in what the user wanted. I want to see it in context and I want to see it out of context. Really can't do that. But what you can do is you can use an exclude statement to get the same result. And these will both total 100%, they'll both be the same. And now the orange values are looking at just based on what's in the data table or what's in the view, where the blue value is based on the overall total. Well, that's what I wanted to cover off this morning. I hope that helps a little bit with an understanding of what context filters do. They're really not that difficult to use. You use them when you want to affect either your fixed LOD, the sets, or top end. And those are the only values that those are going to affect at this point. Thank you for being with us today. If you have any questions, reach out. Love to talk with you. If you have some suggestions on things you'd like to see in future Data Doctors, please let Sigar know or let me know.